The commander said it calmly, the way predators do when they believe the hunt is already finished. No powers in class. The words carried across the amphitheater of the Karyan War Academy, amplified by bone-conductive speakers embedded in black stone walls. 2,000 cadets, towering reptilians, plated arthropods, sulfur-breathing methane breathers, and things that had never evolved names for fear, went still at once. Rules were survival here. Discipline was oxygen. At least, that's what the coalition told itself. Human Lieutenant Mara Cade sat in the front row, hands folded, boots planted flat on the polished obsidian floor. She looked exactly like the intelligence brief described, baseline human, no visible augmentations, no glowing organs, no psionic aura. Brown eyes. Dark hair tied back. An expression that could be read as bored or polite depending on how badly you wanted to underestimate her. Commander Vrasik stood on the dais above them, a monument to conquest. 3 meters tall, 6 limbs, kite in armor etched with campaign sigils. His compound eyes scanned the room, lingering on Mara just a second too long. Humans were new here. Humans were tolerated. Humans were being evaluated. No species-specific abilities. Vrasik continued, his voice sharp and metallic. No exceptions. The coalition does not indulge biological unfairness. A few cadets hissed approval. Others flexed claws or mandibles unconsciously. They'd all heard the rumors. Humans were dangerous when cornered, unpredictable under stress, capable of violence disproportionate to their size. Vrasik believed rumors were excuses weak species made after losing. His eyes returned to Mara. "Lieutenant Cade," he said. "You appear amused." Mara looked up slowly. "Do I, sir? You are smiling." She touched her cheek as if surprised. "Huh. Guess I am." A murmur rippled through the amphitheater. Casual defiance wasn't common here. It was usually corrected quickly and painfully. Vrasik descended from the dais, each step heavy, deliberate. He stopped directly in front of her, looming so close his shadow swallowed her entire frame. "Humans are here to learn restraint," he said. "Your species survived its cradle world through luck and numbers, not superiority." Mara stood. She was small compared to him, barely reaching the lower ridge of his thorax. She met his eyes anyway. "Funny," she said. "Back home, we say that about bullies." That did it. Threat glands flared across the room. Several cadets half rose from their seats before remembering where they were. Security drones rotated, weapons primed. Vrasik's mandibles spread in something like a smile. "Humans," he said softly, "are permitted here because the coalition is merciful. Not because you are equals." He extended one clawed hand and seized Mara's upper arm. The grip was calculated. Not enough to crush bone. Enough to hurt. Enough to remind everyone watching that he could end her whenever he chose. "This," Vrasik said, tightening slightly, "is what restraint looks like." Pain flashed up Mara's arm. Her heart rate spiked. Adrenaline surged. Her smile didn't fade. "Oops," she said. The word barely had time to exist before Vrasik felt it. Something was wrong. His arm didn't release. It didn't respond. Motor signals fired. Nothing moved. Pain receptors screamed as muscles contracted all at once, past every biological safety threshold his species possessed. Chitin plates cracked. Ligaments snapped with sharp, wet pops. Vrasik roared as his arm locked solid, joints tearing themselves apart under their own strength. Mara stepped forward, closer now, her voice low enough that only he could hear it. "Rule says no powers," she murmured. "This isn't a power. It's a feature." She twisted. Vrasik hit the floor hard enough to crater the obsidian, howling as what remained of his arm finally tore free and flopped uselessly at his side. For a heartbeat, the galaxy stopped. Then the amphitheater exploded into chaos. Cadets scrambled back. Some fled outright. Others drew weapons they were not authorized to use. Security drones screamed alerts as their sensors tried, and failed, to identify any energy discharge, any psionic spike, any illegal tech activation. There was nothing. Just a human standing over a broken commander, breathing hard, eyes bright with something ancient and cold. Weapons locked on her from every angle. "Stand down!" Mara shouted. "Medical emergency!" He grabbed me. The words sounded absurd. The footage didn't. Every angle replayed the same truth. Vrasik initiated contact. Vrasik applied force. Mara reacted. No external energy. No violation of coalition law. Vrasik was dragged away, still screaming threats and promises of extinction. Mara was escorted out under armed guard, boots echoing through corridors that suddenly felt very small. By the time she reached containment, the story had already spread. The human broke a commander without powers. The human did it smiling. They put her in a cell meant for apex predators. Gravity 3 times standard. Temperature barely survivable. Nutrient rations designed to weaken aggressive species. Mara sat on the floor, back against the wall, arms wrapped around her knees. She'd known this would happen. Back on Earth, they'd warned her, don't show them everything. Let them think you're small. Let them make the first mistake. Still, part of her wish Vrasik had just kept his hands to himself. Hours later, the cell field shimmered. Commander Vrasik stood outside, arm replaced by a sleek synthetic limb, eyes burning with something deeper than pain. "You humiliated me," he said. Mara looked up. "You grabbed me. You exposed the coalition to your deceit." "No," she said calmly. "I exposed your assumptions." Vrasik leaned closer to the barrier. "You will be expelled. Your species will be punished." Mara smiled again, slower this time. "Maybe," she said. "But you should probably check your long-range sensors first." Vrasik hesitated. Then the alarms began to scream. Deep space warning tones. Ancient ones. The kind that hadn't been used since the last great interstellar war. Vrasik turned toward the viewport just as the first human ships tore out of hyperspace. Not sleek. Not elegant. Just many. Mara stood, shadows stretching behind her as the light of incoming fleets filled the station. "Told you," she said softly. "No powers." She tilted her head, eyes reflecting distant explosions. "Just humans." The coalition liked to pretend it understood humans. That was the first mistake. In the hours after Commander Vrasik's fall, analysts flooded the datanets with reassessments. Every sensor log from the amphitheater was torn apart molecule by molecule. They searched for radiation spikes, quantum distortions, psionic harmonics, anything that could explain how a baseline mammal had shattered a war commander's limb without breaking a single rule. They found nothing. Because humans hadn't cheated. They'd just never told the whole truth. The human limitation doctrine had been filed away during first contact, categorized as cultural myth. Coalition xenobiologists had laughed at it. The idea that a species would evolve with built-in governors, mental restraints limiting physical output to prevent self-destruction, was considered inefficient. No dominant species limited itself. Only prey did that. What the coalition failed to grasp was that humans weren't prey that became predators. They were predators who'd learned to live with themselves. Mara Cade sat in her containment cell, gravity pressing down on her bones, heart beating steady despite the strain. Her muscles ached. Micro tears burned beneath her skin. The price of what she'd done was already being paid. She welcomed it. Pain meant the limiter had re-engaged. Pain meant she was still human. Outside the cell, the Academy trembled as emergency protocols cascaded. Fleet commanders argued. Politicians screamed. Security chiefs demanded authorization to execute the prisoner before the situation escalated. The request was denied. Too many cameras. Too many witnesses. Too much evidence that the coalition's golden commander had been the one to cross the line. Vrasik arrived 6 hours later. His new arm was a work of art, reinforced alloy layered with reactive armor, capable of crushing light vehicles. A badge of shame hidden beneath an upgrade. He stood in silence for a long time, watching Mara sit cross-legged on the floor. You are not what your files claim, he finally said. Mara didn't look up. Files usually lie by omission. You disabled your nervous system's safety constraints, Brassic said. We have never observed a species capable of that voluntarily. Yeah, she replied. Most species didn't evolve on a planet that actively tried to kill them every day. Brassic's mandibles clicked. You could have torn your own arm apart. Still can, Mara said. That's why we don't do it casually. He stepped closer to the barrier. Why reveal this now? Mara looked up at him then. Really looked. Because you touched me, she said. And because humans have learned that if we don't draw lines early, someone always decides to move them for us. Brassic hissed softly. Your species is under coalition protection. Retaliation is forbidden. Mara smiled, but there was no humor in it. That's not retaliation. She nodded toward the ceiling. That's extraction. As if summoned by the word, the station lurched violently. Warning lights flared red. The gravity fluctuated, throwing Brassic off balance. Deep space alarms howled, ancient, rarely used tones reserved for existential threats. Brassic turned toward the panoramic viewport. The stars were gone. In their place was metal. Hundreds of ships, then thousands, boiling out of hyperspace in chaotic formations that would have earned any coalition admiral a court-martial. Hulls mismatched. Drives overpowered. Weapon hardpoints welded onto civilian frames. No elegance. No symmetry. Just intent. Impossible, Brassic whispered. Human fleet capacity is limited. Your treaties. We don't bring the fleet, Mara interrupted calmly. We bring everyone. On the tactical feeds, coalition defense rings began lighting up as target locks screamed for attention. Automated hails went unanswered. Then a single transmission cut through every channel, unencrypted, untranslated, spoken slowly and clearly in coalition standard. This is Admiral Javier Reyes of the Terran Emergency Coalition. The name meant nothing to Brassic. The tone did. You are currently detaining a Terran officer. The voice continued. You have 3 minutes to release her. Brassic felt something unfamiliar twist in his gut. Fear. The coalition's outer defense platforms opened fire. Energy lances slashed across space, brilliant and precise. The human ships didn't evade. They took the hits. Shields flared, then thickened, feeding on the energy pouring into them. Reactors spooled higher. Hull temperatures normalized. Brassic stared as damage reports failed to arrive. What is that shielding? He demanded. Mara's eyes never left the viewport. Adaptive failure conversion, she said. We call it learning the hard way. The first human projectile hit a defense platform at relativistic speed. There was no explosion. The platform simply ceased to exist. Silence followed. Then the human fleet advanced. Brassic backed away from the barrier, voice tight. You are forcing war. Mara stood, bones creaking under the heavy gravity, and faced him fully. No, she said. You're watching one. She stepped closer to the field, her reflection overlapping his. And we haven't even gotten mad yet. War, the coalition had always believed, was a matter of control. Control of space. Control of information. Control of escalation. Humans ruined all three inside of 10 minutes. The human formation didn't tighten. It didn't assume textbook engagement patterns. Ships drifted, surged, and collided with one another's projected firing lanes like a brawl that refused to organize itself. Any coalition tactician would have called it suicidal. Then the first boarding pods launched. They weren't sleek drop spears or cloaked insertion darts. They were industrial cylinders ripped from freight loaders, retrofitted with thrusters that burned hot and ugly. They slammed into coalition hulls at angles no sane engineer would approve. And they opened. Human Marines poured out. Not young, pristine soldiers bred in academies. Old men with gray in their beards. Women with scars crossing their faces and tattoos half faded by time. Veterans recalled from retirement, militias that had never officially existed, civilians who'd fought once before and decided they were willing to do it again. They wore mismatched armor and carried weapons older than some coalition species. They laughed as they advanced. Vrasik watched the internal feeds in growing disbelief as corridor after corridor fell. Coalition defenders fired disciplined volleys, plasma and hard light cutting down intruders. And the humans kept coming. Some fell. Many bled. But none of them retreated. They do not fear death, Vrasik said quietly. Mara stood beside him now, the cell field lowered by orders that had come too late to matter. Her wrists were still bound, more out of habit than necessity. No, she corrected. We're just very bad at stopping when we think we're right. A coalition strike cruiser maneuvered into position, its spinal weapon charging. The tactical display projected the outcome in neat, reassuring numbers. Probability of human flagship destruction, 91.3%. The beam fired. It struck the Terran command ship dead center. For half a second, Vrasik allowed himself hope. Then the beam bent. Not reflected. Not absorbed. Bent. The human ship's shields warped space around the impact point, feeding the energy inward, converting overload into thrust. The command vessel surged forward, riding the coalition's own weapon fire like a wave. Vrasik felt his mandibles slacken. Who taught you to do this? He asked. Mara didn't answer immediately. Her gaze was distant now, following a boarding team as it breached a command node and cleared it with brutal efficiency. She watched a human marine drag a wounded alien to cover before returning fire. Everyone who ever tried to wipe us out, she said finally. We keep their lessons. Coalition command fractured. Species that had once marched in lockstep began issuing independent retreat orders. Some tried to surrender. The humans recorded every transmission. They ignored most of them. A wing of human ships peeled off and punched straight toward the Academy station. Vrasik turned sharply. You said this was extraction. It is, Mara replied. For me. The station rocked as docking clamps failed under sudden stress. Hull sections depressurized. Emergency bulkheads slammed down, too slow in too many places. Human boarding teams breached the Academy itself. The same halls where cadets had once whispered about humans in amused contempt now echoed with gunfire, and shouted orders in a dozen Terran languages. Vrasik backed away as a human squad advanced down the corridor. They didn't fire at him. They didn't need to. Their leader, a woman with silver hair and eyes like cold steel, paused when she saw Mara. Lieutenant, she said, voice rough but warm. You look like hell. Mara smiled despite herself. You should see the other guy. The officer's gaze flicked to Vrasik for half a second. Her expression hardened. To be clear, she said to him, this is the part where you stop being in charge. Vrasik swallowed. You are dismantling the coalition. No, the officer replied. We're stress testing it. She turned back to Mara. Admiral Reyes wants you on the bridge. As they moved through the wreckage, Vrasik followed at a distance, too stunned to flee. He watched humans coordinate chaos into momentum, every loss feeding the next push. On the bridge of the Terran command ship, Admiral Reyes stood with hands clasped behind his back, eyes locked on the tactical holo. He was old, tired, and very, very calm. He didn't look surprised when Mara entered. Lieutenant Cade, he said. Status? Alive, she replied. Mostly. Reyes nodded. Good. The coalition is collapsing faster than expected. Vrasik stepped forward, unable to stop himself. You are destroying centuries of balance. Reyes finally looked at him. No, he said evenly. We're revealing it. The Admiral gestured to the display, where coalition fleets were retreating, fragmenting, or going dark. You built a system that only works as long as no one pushes back. Reyes continued. That's not balance. That's bullying with paperwork. Vrasik felt something crack, not bone, but belief. And now? He asked. Reyes' mouth twitched into something that might have been a smile. Now, he said, we see who survives the audit. Outside the viewport, another coalition core world went dark. And the humans kept advancing. The war lasted 9 hours. That was all it took. Coalition command structures, centuries old, designed to outlast even supernovae, collapsed in sequences that were almost elegant in their destruction. Fleets fractured. Planetary defense rings failed. Warships that once symbolized invincibility now drifted as empty hulks, their crews either gone or surrendered. Vrasek watched it all unfold from a corner of the Terran command bridge, his synthetic arm twitching uselessly at his side. Every system he had ever trusted, every doctrine he had enforced, every victory he had celebrated, it had been built on assumptions. And humans shattered every one of them without firing a single, special, weapon. Mara Cade stood at the center of the bridge, hands behind her back, surveying the chaos like a conductor watching her orchestra. Her boots scuffed softly against the metal deck. She had been told to play nice, to comply, to respect coalition law. And she had done all that until someone, Vrasek, decided to touch her. You could have wiped them out, Vrasek said finally, voice low, almost broken. Every species, every system. Why stop? Mara considered him, calm and unflinching. Because if we destroyed every species that underestimated us, she said slowly, we'd never get anywhere. We'd just be monsters. Vrasek's mandibles clicked. He wanted to argue. He wanted to scream. He wanted to believe humans were incapable of mercy. But deep down, he realized that what he faced wasn't mercy, it was strategy, a form of intelligence the coalition had never anticipated. Humans didn't annihilate because it was easy. They annihilated because it was necessary. And sometimes they didn't, because they had a reason not to. Admiral Reyes, standing near the tactical hollow, nodded at Mara. Lesson delivered, he said. They'll remember it. Mara allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. I'd like to see them try to forget it. Vrasek swallowed hard. And what about the academy? Rebuilt, Mara said. With humans instructing the instructors. From now on, everyone knows what happens when you tell a human what they cannot do. Coalition delegations began drafting surrender terms, but the humans didn't wait for signatures. They didn't negotiate in good faith, because negotiation wasn't the point. The point was to remind everyone that underestimating humanity was fatal. Vrasek, disgraced and humiliated, was left with nothing. Not power. Not pride. Not control. Humanity had turned the coalition's greatest strengths against them: arrogance, protocol, and blind faith in rules. Mara turned back to the viewport, watching the retreating alien fleets scatter across hyperspace. Stars winked past the human ships like a promise. You think they'll come back? Vrasek asked quietly. Mara shrugged. Sure. But next time, they'll ask first. He looked at her, searching her expression for the cruelty he expected, the rage he deserved. Instead, he saw something else: patience. Calm. That terrible, human patience born of survival, stubbornness, and centuries of being underestimated. Mara leaned slightly toward him. Also, paperwork, she added with a sly grin. The human fleet departed, leaving the coalition to lick its wounds and rethink every assumption. In every academy and command center across the galaxy, a new rule was whispered with fear and awe. Never tell a human what they are not allowed to be. Because sometimes, oops, is the last warning you get. And sometimes, it's the beginning of a war the galaxy will never forget. Humans didn't just survive the coalition. They redefined it. And somewhere deep in the wreckage of old doctrines, the universe realized something frighteningly simple. Humanity always delivers, even when you think it's impossible.